The desert sky was turning orange and gold as the sun began to sink behind the sandstone cliffs. Warm winds brushed across the dry earth, carrying the smell of sagebrush and old wood. It was the kind of evening when everything seemed calm, as if the land itself were taking a deep breath. Samuel Price sat tall on his horse, a chestnut mare named Daisy. He had spent all his life working on this ranch just outside the small town. Every evening he rode out to check on the cattle before the night settled in. This was his routine, something that gave him peace. He knew these lands better than anyone. Every path, every fence line, every whisper of the wind. But that evening felt slightly different. There was a stillness in the air, the kind that makes a man slow down and listen. As he rode past the dry creek bed, Samuel noticed how quiet everything was. The usual chirping of crickets and rustling of small creatures was gone. Even Daisy moved slower, her ears flicking nervously. Samuel's eyes scanned the horizon. He wasn't a man who believed in sudden danger, but years of living in the open had taught him to respect silence. Silence often meant something was near. He reached the open meadow where the fence line curved along the canyon. He dismounted, his boots pressing into the dust. The last light of the sun painted the rocks in shades of red and orange. He bent down to fix a loose wire on the fence, humming softly to himself. That was when he heard it, a sharp rustle from behind him. It wasn't the sound of an animal. It was too quick, too human. Samuel straightened slowly. His fingers were still resting on the wire, but his mind had already shifted. His heart gave one steady, heavy beat. Daisy let out a soft snort and took a step back, her muscles tense. Then came a soft, trembling voice from behind him. "Easy, don't move." The words were quiet, but they carried something that froze him in place. Not power, not anger, fear. Samuel raised his hands slightly, not turning around yet. "All right," he said in a calm voice. "I'm not moving." He turned his head slowly, careful not to make any sudden movements. Standing just a few steps away was a girl. She looked no older than 16. Her long, dark hair was tied in a loose braid that had come undone at the ends. Her face was streaked with dust. She was barefoot, her feet covered in dry earth. In her shaking hand, she held a small hunting knife, the blade reflecting the fading sunlight. But what Samuel saw first wasn't the knife. It was her eyes, wide, alert, and terrified. Her breathing was uneven, like she had been running. Her shoulders were tight, and she stood half hidden behind a mesquite bush. She didn't look like someone who wanted to hurt him. She looked like someone trying not to get hurt. Samuel spoke softly, the same way he would speak to a nervous horse. "You're all right," he said. "Nobody's gonna harm you." The girl didn't answer. Her knuckles were white around the handle of the knife. She took a step back, her bare heel scraping against the dirt. Samuel stayed perfectly still. He had dealt with wild horses and lost calves. He knew that sometimes words weren't just words. They were ropes that could either calm or break a fragile moment. "You hungry?" he asked gently. "You look tired." The girl's eyes flickered for a second. A small shift. Not trust, but something close to listening. Samuel slowly lowered one hand to show her he wasn't hiding anything. "My name's Samuel," he said. "I live just over the ridge. Been here a long time." Her lips parted slightly, like she wanted to say something but wasn't sure how. Samuel saw her shoulders rise and fall quickly. She was still ready to run if she needed to. The wind picked up a little, carrying the dry scent of sage. A crow called in the distance. The sun slipped lower, painting the sky in deep pink and violet. The girl glanced toward the horizon and then back at Samuel. "You're not from around here, are you?" Samuel asked. She shook her head just once. Her eyes softened for a moment, and Samuel saw the truth. She was alone. She had been out there without help. Samuel didn't ask how she got there. Not yet. He could see she wasn't ready. What she needed first was to feel safe. "You don't have to run," he said softly. "I'm not your enemy." The girl's chest rose and fell faster now. The wind pushed her braid across her face. She wiped it away with the back of her hand, still gripping the knife tightly. Samuel slowly took a step backward. Not toward her, but away. He wanted her to see that he wasn't trying to trap her. "See?" he said gently. No tricks. For a moment, neither of them moved. The desert stretched around them, endless and silent. The girl's lower lip trembled. Her eyes glistened, though she blinked quickly to hide it. She wasn't just scared. She was exhausted. Samuel recognized that look. He had seen it before, in lost travelers, in children separated from their families. It was the look of someone carrying too much fear on small shoulders. Then she finally spoke. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "They said no one would help." Samuel's heart clenched at the words. Whoever they were, they had filled her with fear. But here, standing in the fading light, was a choice for both of them. He could turn her away, or he could show her something different. He softened his voice even more. "Well," he said, "they were wrong." She stared at him like she was trying to decide if he was real. Samuel lowered his hands completely and slowly sat down on the ground. The dirt was warm beneath him. "See," he said with a little smile. "No harm can come from a man sitting in the dirt." The girl frowned, confused. But she didn't run. Her breathing slowed just a little. Daisy, sensing Samuel's calm, walked a step closer. The horse lowered her head and snorted softly. The girl's eyes flicked to the horse. For the first time, a small spark of something. Curiosity replaced fear. "She won't hurt you," Samuel said softly. "Her name's Daisy. She likes carrots. And naps." A tiny sound escaped the girl. Not quite a laugh, but something close to it. The desert didn't feel so cold anymore. The knife in her hand shook a little less. Samuel didn't rush her. He just sat there, watching the last sunlight fade into a soft golden glow. He knew trust wasn't something that came from big promises. It came from quiet moments like this, when no one pushed too hard. Minutes passed slowly, like the desert itself was holding its breath. Then the girl spoke again, just one word. "Nayeli." Samuel tilted his head. "That your name?" She nodded. It was a small, careful nod. Samuel smiled softly. "That's a beautiful name, Nayeli." Her grip on the knife finally loosened. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called as night slowly fell. The stars began to appear one by one. Samuel knew the hard part wasn't over. Nayeli was still frightened, still alone. But tonight she wasn't invisible anymore. And though neither of them said it out loud, a fragile bridge had formed between a frightened girl and a quiet rancher under the open desert sky. That single moment, a whispered, "Easy, don't move," was the start of something that would change both their lives. The desert night was calm, with a soft breeze moving through the dry grass. The stars above shone like tiny lanterns scattered across a dark blue sky. Samuel sat quietly near the fence, still on the warm dirt where he had been moments ago. Nayeli, the young Apache girl, stood a few steps away, watching him closely. The fear in her eyes had not disappeared completely, but something inside her had shifted. She was still holding the small knife, but her hands weren't shaking as much as before. Samuel knew the trust between them was fragile. He also knew that sometimes trust didn't need loud words or big actions. It grew slowly, like the way a seed breaks through dry earth. Very softly, he spoke again. "Nayeli, you don't have to stay out here alone. There's a safe place just over that ridge," he said, pointing toward his ranch house in the distance. "It's warm inside. There's food and water, too. You can rest if you want." Nayeli didn't move at first. Her eyes darted toward the open desert behind her, as if part of her still wanted to run, but running meant cold nights, empty stomachs, and no shelter. She had been alone for days. Her lips were dry, her feet were bruised, and she could barely keep her eyes open. Samuel didn't rush her. Instead, he slowly stood up and walked to Daisy, his horse, making sure Nayeli could see every movement. He whispered something soft to the horse and pulled out a small canteen of water tied to the saddle. Then he placed the canteen on the ground halfway between them. "Here," he said gently. "If you're thirsty, it's clean." Nayeli stared at the canteen like it was both a gift and a test. She waited a moment, then slowly crouched down, her eyes never leaving Samuel. She picked up the canteen and lifted it to her lips. The first sip burned a little, not because it was hot, but because she had been so thirsty for so long. She drank slowly, like someone afraid it might disappear. Samuel said nothing. He just watched, letting the silence speak for him. After a few minutes, Nayeli lowered the canteen. The air between them was no longer filled with fear, but something softer, like a quiet understanding. Samuel took a step closer to Daisy. "You can ride with me if you're too tired to walk," he offered. "Or we can walk together. No one will force you." For a long moment, Nayeli didn't answer. But then, almost too quietly to hear, she whispered, "Walk." Samuel nodded once, as if she had made the most important decision in the world. He led Daisy by the reins and started walking slowly, giving Nayeli space to follow. She hesitated at first, looking back toward the dark desert, and then began to walk behind him. The ranch house sat under a big oak tree, its windows glowing faintly from the lantern light inside. It wasn't fancy, but it felt warm, like a place that carried laughter and quiet kindness. When they reached the porch, Samuel turned to Nayeli. "You're safe here," he said softly. She looked around nervously. She had spent many nights hiding from the world, and stepping into someone's home felt strange, almost unreal. But Samuel didn't push her. He opened the door slowly and stepped inside, leaving it wide open for her. Inside, the house smelled of bread and old wood. The walls were lined with shelves of books, family photos, and small tools. A small fire flickered in the stove, casting a golden glow across the room. Samuel's wife, Clara, stood near the kitchen table, folding a clean cloth. She looked up when she saw Samuel walk in, and then her eyes landed on Nayeli. Clara didn't look shocked. She didn't ask loud questions. She simply smiled softly, the kind of smile that told a stranger they were welcome. "Well," she said kindly, "you must be freezing. Come inside, dear." Nayeli stood on the porch, unsure if she should step in. Clara reached for a folded blanket on a chair and gently placed it near the doorway. Not on Nayeli, just close enough so she could pick it up if she wanted. That small gesture was enough. Nayeli slowly stepped inside, clutching the edge of her braid with one hand. Clara moved toward the stove and poured warm soup into a bowl. The smell filled the room, and soft, comforting like home. She placed the bowl on the table and stepped back. "You can eat as much as you want," she said softly. Nayeli sat at the table slowly, as if unsure it was really meant for her. She lifted the spoon carefully. The first sip of soup made her eyes close for a moment. It was warm, gentle, and tasted like safety. Samuel took off his hat and sat across from her. Clara didn't bombard the girl with questions. She knew sometimes silence was better than talk. She simply sat down with her knitting, humming a soft tune. After Nayeli finished eating, Clara brought her a cup of warm tea. The warmth spread through Nayeli's small hands, and for the first time in many nights, she felt her body relax. As the hours passed, the darkness outside grew deeper. Samuel sat quietly, letting Nayeli find her voice in her own time. Slowly, she began to talk. Her words were soft and unsure at first. She told them her name again, as if testing if it was still hers. She spoke about the long journey she had taken, about being separated from her people, about the nights spent under the cold sky with nothing but the stars for company. She had been running for days, unsure if anyone in the world could be trusted. Clara's eyes softened as she listened. Samuel leaned forward, elbows on the table, not interrupting even once. Every word that left Nayeli's lips was like a fragile thread she was carefully laying down, hoping it wouldn't be broken. When she finished, the house was quiet. Samuel finally spoke. "You don't have to run anymore," he said gently. "You're safe here. Tomorrow we'll help you find your family. But tonight you rest." Nayeli lowered her head. No one had said words like that to her in a long time. For a brief moment, she wanted to believe them. Clara showed her to a small room at the end of the hallway. It had a soft bed with a handmade quilt, a small oil lamp, and a single window that looked out over the fields. Nayeli stood at the doorway, unsure if she should step inside. Clara touched her shoulder lightly just for a second and whispered, "You're welcome here." Nayeli stepped in and ran her fingers over the quilt. She couldn't remember the last time she had touched something soft. She climbed into bed slowly, her heart still carrying small pieces of fear. But now there was something new too. Hope. Outside, the ranch lay under the stars. Daisy rested near the fence, and the wind moved gently through the trees. Inside, Samuel and Clara sat quietly by the fire, speaking in low voices about the girl who had found her way to their porch. The next morning, the golden light of dawn filled the house. Birds sang outside. Nayeli opened her eyes to the soft sound of a rooster crowing. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then she saw the sunlight streaming through the small window and remembered the kind faces of Samuel and Clara. When she stepped out of the room, Clara was already at the table making breakfast. Samuel was outside saddling Daisy. "Morning," Clara said with a warm smile. "Did you sleep well?" Nayeli nodded shyly. She didn't have many words yet, but she didn't need them. Clara placed a plate of warm bread and fruit in front of her. Later that day, Samuel rode into town to speak with some people he trusted, people who could help Nayeli reconnect with her community and keep her safe. Clara stayed with Nayeli, teaching her how to feed the chickens and collect eggs. At first, Nayeli was quiet and hesitant, but slowly she began to smile. Days turned into weeks. The fear in Nayeli's eyes softened each day. Samuel and Clara treated her not like a stranger, but like someone who belonged. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Nayeli sat on the porch with Samuel. The desert sky was glowing again, the same warm colors from the night they first met. Samuel turned to her and said softly, "That night, when you said easy, don't move, I knew you were scared, but I also knew you were brave. You made it here on your own." Nayeli looked out over the land. She still carried the memory of fear, but now it was no longer the only memory she had. There was also kindness, safety, a warm home. She whispered, "Thank you." Samuel smiled. "You're safe now," he said, and this time, she believed him. The wind moved softly through the desert, the stars began to rise, and a once frightened girl finally felt like she had found her place in the world. It all began with a quiet moment under the fading sun, a trembling voice and a simple promise. "You're safe now."